The rise and fall of William Fox is the story of Hollywood.
William Fox was one of the film pioneers.
William Fox is one of the founders of the American motion picture industry.
He came into the business early. He had an extraordinary, quite brief glory.
In many ways, he was the most forward-thinking of all of these executives.
He was born in Hungary, of German-Jewish descent. Clearly the name was not William Fox. Comes to this country, to America, when very young. Lives on the East Coast in the New York area.
He viewed his father as shiftless, no ambition whatsoever. So he took the reverse of that and became extremely ambitious.
William Fox was the real sole breadwinner from the time he was a kid for his family.
At age 11, I found my first job with a clothing firm. The day's work consisted of 11 hours a day for 6 days a week and a half day on Sunday. My mother encouraged me to save. Every penny was something that I denied myself, with the thought in mind that if I was going forward, I had to have money. William Fox.
William Fox leaves the garment industry, and with a friend, they devise this vaudeville routine.
He initially made enough money to invest in what we would call today an arcade. And once he had established that kind of place, he decided to put in a Nickelodeon.
In the Nickelodeon era, you could make a film for $500 or $800 and you could sell it for $6,000, and it was just like opening the cash register and taking out handfuls of money.
He builds up a small empire of Nickelodeon arcades.
From there, he then built up one of the very first regional distribution organizations, the Greater New York Film Rental Company.
William Fox is one of those people who succeeds at it. Most people did not succeed. There was a force in the country on the East Coast called the Motion Picture Patents Company, which controlled as many of the inventions that went towards film as it could.
They had a stranglehold on manufacturing because they owned the camera patents and the projector patents. Essentially, independent filmmaking was not possible.
The battle between the independents, led by William Fox, against Thomas Edison and the Edison Biograph and Vitagraph establishment companies was utterly crucial in the development of the American motion picture. The trust companies under Edison were attempting to completely monopolize motion pictures in North America and keep motion pictures essentially at a very low level, one-reelers that would play in Nickelodeons.
They thought what the business was in their day was showing any scrap of film you could get your hands on to an audience that had really never seen film before.
They weren't doing very much to improve the length or the quality or the subtlety or the content of motion pictures. They got into a rut of issuing one-reelers or two-reelers.
They put together this very first nationwide system called the General Film Company by buying up the regional distributors that they'd already been associated with. They had been dealing with 69 regional distributors in the United States, so they bought 58, they put 10 out of business, 68 out of 69. The 69th and last was the Greater New York Film Rental Company of William Fox. Edison felt he had to have this company, but Fox just wouldn't sell out to Edison. And Edison finally cut off his supply of films. And so Fox did a couple of things that had a profound impact on motion picture history. He realized the only way you can really guarantee a source of films if you're a distributor is to become a producer also. The second very, very important thing he did was he sued the trust and Thomas Edison.
This set the stage for one of the biggest battles in the history of motion pictures. The early legal rulings went against the independents, but so long as Fox could get a supply of films from the independents, he could keep his business alive. He then starts to produce films through third parties, and then in 1914, he actually opens his first studio in Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Movies is a kind of freebooters enterprise. It's the hustlers, often the people who couldn't get in through more traditional routes, either because of anti-Semitism or because of old boy network.
The independent companies would bring their equipment oftentimes in from Europe, smuggle it in actually, and they were forced to keep it as far as possible away from the trust.
The patent company thugs would come sometimes and beat up the cameramen and the producers and so on. They would even destroy sets.
Pinkerton detectives working for Edison trying to shoot up cameras and destroy them that hadn't been properly purchased through Edison.
They actually wore guns on the set, and they'd shoot it up. They'd try to stop them from shooting the picture.
The business moved west to get away from them, to make a new world in California. And Fox was part of that.
Off they went out to Los Angeles and created their own old boy network.
And from a business perspective, made a lot of sense. You could make pictures all year round.
There were fields and orange groves and farms. Samuel Goldwyn rode a horse to work. That's how glorious Los Angeles was in those days, with clean air. It was a paradise.
In the beginning, William Fox stuck to what we might call formula or tried and true kinds of stories. He liked Westerns. He hired actors like Buck Jones, Tom Mix. He found a nice young plump lady from Ohio.
We had had every type of woman on the screen except an Arabian. Our publicity director conceived the story that her father was an Arab and her mother was a French woman. So we took Arab and, spelling it backwards, made Bera, and shortened Theodosia to Theta, and thus the name Theta Bera. William Fox.
He spent most of his time in New York. He was a businessman, not a filmmaker.
The films were being made in Hollywood at this time, but the businessmen, the real money men, they were in New York.
That said, he sent his secretary, Saul Wurtzel, out to Los Angeles to run the studio.
And Saul was hesitant to leave New York because he had this big extended family and he'd never been outside of New York before. But he went because I think he feared he would lose his job if he didn't.
Saul was a very capable studio manager, but William Fox browbeat him with a daily stream of letters and telegrams.
My dear Saul, I have reviewed the comedy Footlight Maids. This I consider impractical, impossible, and unreleasable, and I've ordered it thrown into the waste heap, regardless of the opinion of those you have surrounding you. Los comedians are as funny as a crutch. I am obliged to blame you for this condition. Very truly yours, William Fox.
The case against the Motion Picture Patents Company, Edison's Trust, spent many years in the law courts.
With all the money behind the patents company, it must have seemed like an almost insurmountable task to go against these people.
The battle between the independents and the trust companies was a real David versus Goliath kind of thing. Edison was world famous. Of course, the man that invented the electric light bulb.
The trust was a huge operation, and they had money, influence, and armed detectives on their side.
And the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. joined William Fox in their lawsuits against Thomas Edison. The final decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1917 mandated the immediate breakup of the trust.
And he outlasted them, and he outfought them, and he won a legal battle that changed the history of motion pictures.
He helped to break Edison's hold on the entire motion picture industry.
And that enabled the film industry to grow freely.
Had the Edison Trust survived, we would never have had a Hollywood.
At this point, Fox discovers in order to make great films, you need great filmmakers.